For 70 years, the Canadian economy has been glued to the United States. It was a relationship built on trust, open borders, and free trade, a partnership so seamless that the border often felt like a formality rather than a barrier. Since the end of the Second World War, and solidified through treaties like the 1965 Auto Pact and later NAFTA, the two economies essentially functioned as one heavily integrated machine. To the rest of the world, the Canadian economy was viewed as the attic of the American industrial powerhouse, a quiet, reliable, and politically boring place where the U.S. stored its resources until it needed them. But as of this month, that era is officially over. Welcome to Geo Capitalist, where we break down how nations, industries, and alliances quietly reshape global power. In today's video, we explore Canada's new $100 billion move that Washington can't stop. If you value clear, long-term analysis like this, consider subscribing. Let's get started. Recent aggressive policy shifts in Washington have shattered the North American alliance. The White House is betting that tariffs and protectionism will force Canada to bend the knee. This isn't just a minor dispute over lumber prices or dairy quotas. This is a fundamental rethinking of the continental relationship. American strategists are banking on the historical fact that Canada has nowhere else to go. They assume that because Canada is geographically locked to the continent, it is economically locked to American policy. But they are wrong. While American policymakers were focused on closing the border and engaging in populist rhetoric, Ottawa was quietly executing a strategic pivot that no one in the White House saw coming. Canada has triggered a Plan B, a massive economic realignment involving over $100 billion in strategic assets that the U.S. desperately needs for its own future reindustrialization, but can no longer access on favorable terms. This isn't just a trade dispute where politicians argue on cable news. This is the story of how Washington accidentally created its own biggest rival in the race for 21st century resources. To understand why this is happening now, and why Washington feels so confident in bullying its northern neighbor, we have to look at the map from Washington's perspective. When American strategists look north, they don't see a competitor. They see a captive market. They see a country with a population smaller than California spread across a landmass larger than the United States. Historically, the data supports their arrogance. Roughly 77% of everything Canada exports goes to the United States. In the brutal calculus of geopolitics, this is called singular dependency. It creates an incredibly lopsided power dynamic where one side holds all the cards, or so it seems. The logic in DC is simple. If they slap a 10% or 25% tariff on Canadian goods, Ottawa has no leverage to retaliate. They assume the Canadian economy would collapse within months without open access to the American consumer. They believe that Canadian businesses, desperate for revenue, will lobby their own government to capitulate to any American demand, no matter how unreasonable. This is the Washington gamble. They believe that global trade has become so fragmented and shipping costs so high that Canada cannot possibly build new supply chains fast enough to survive a blockade. They view Canada as a price taker, not a price maker. But this calculation makes a fatal error. It relies on economic data from 30 years ago. It assumes that Canada is still selling what it sold in 1990, raw lumber, basic crude oil, and internal combustion car parts. It ignores the fundamental shift in commodity markets that has happened over the last decade. The world has moved from an oil-based economy to a mineral-based economy, and that shift completely changes the leverage on the map. Washington thinks it is sanctioning a dependent vassal. In reality, they are blockading a critical supplier just as a global shortage for those specific supplies is beginning. While the U.S. has been turning inward, retreating from global trade deals, and antagonizing allies under the banner of America First, Canada has spent the last decade doing the exact opposite. They saw the writing on the wall years ago that the U.S. was becoming an unreliable partner, and they started diversifying. Quietly, without much fanfare, Ottawa has been signing some of the most comprehensive free trade agreements on the planet. This was Plan B, and the numbers are staggering. Take the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, with the European Union. Since its provisional application, bilateral trade in goods and services between Canada and the EU has skyrocketed, reaching roughly 123 billion euros in 2023. That's a massive 71% increase from pre-treaty levels in 2016. Through the CPTPP, Canada has gained preferential access to Japan, Vietnam, and Australia, effectively encircling the Pacific Rim. This means that a Canadian factory or mine today has a legal backdoor to sell its goods to almost 60% of the global economy without going through the United States. The infrastructure for a pivot away from the U.S. is already built. The railways, the deep water ports in Vancouver and Montreal, and the legal treaties are active. This isn't a theoretical plan for 2030. The pipes are laid today. All that was missing was a catalyst to force Canadian companies to abandon their easy American clients and do the hard work of finding new global buyers. Washington's tariffs were that catalyst. They have effectively forced Canadian industry to activate these global networks. Now, let's look at exactly what Canada is taking off the table, because it's a lot more valuable than maple syrup. The core of Canada's counterattack isn't lumber or milk. It is the critical minerals supply chain, the raw materials that will define the next century of warfare and technology. We are talking about a pipeline of projects valued at over $100 billion, aimed specifically at the electric vehicle and high-tech defense sectors. According to recent data, critical mineral-related production already contributes over $30 billion to Canada's GDP. This sector is exploding, and it holds the keys to everything from fighter jets to iPhone batteries. The United States has designated these minerals, lithium, cobalt, nickel, graphite, as a matter of national security. The Pentagon needs Canadian cobalt and nickel to build guidance systems and armor. For years, the assumption in Washington was that this supply chain would be fully integrated, North American mines feeding American factories in a seamless, friendly loop. But in a trade war, these assets become leverage. If Canadian lithium becomes 25% more expensive for American buyers due to tariffs, U.S. battery plants become uncompetitive overnight compared to their Chinese counterparts. Meanwhile, Canada sits on some of the largest undeveloped reserves of these materials in the Western world. By placing barriers on Canadian imports, the U.S. is essentially cutting itself off from the only secure supply of these minerals that isn't controlled by China or Russia. And guess who else is desperate for these resources? This is where the strategy gets sophisticated and where the end of an era becomes tangible. Europe is currently implementing the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM. Essentially, Europe is taxing dirty imports. If your steel is made with coal, you pay a penalty. If it's made with hydro, you don't. Canada produces some of the greenest aluminum and steel in the world, thanks to its massive hydroelectric grid in Quebec and British Columbia. The United States, with its heavier reliance on fossil fuels for heavy industry, is at a massive disadvantage here. As Washington erects barriers, Canada is redirecting its green premium metals directly to German automakers like Volkswagen and BMW, who need low-carbon inputs to meet EU regulations. We are already seeing this capital flight. Volkswagen's battery company PowerCo is investing roughly $7 billion to build a massive gigafactory in St. Thomas, Ontario. This plant will have a capacity of 90 gigawatt-hours, enough for 1 million EVs a year. Why are they building in Canada and not the US? Because they want direct access to Canadian resources and Canadian energy markets without the volatility of American trade policy. By pivoting east, Canada secures a partner that values its regulatory alignment, leaving American manufacturers to source dirtier, more expensive alternatives or pay the tariffs themselves. Then, there is the Pacific flank. This is the wild card that geopolitics experts are watching closely, and it's arguably the biggest threat to American economic hegemony in the Pacific. Japan and South Korea are industrial giants with zero natural resources. They are desperate for energy security. Historically, they relied on the Middle East, but instability in the Persian Gulf has them terrified. They need a stable, democratic partner. Canada's new LNG, liquefied natural gas capacity on the West Coast, is coming online at the exact moment Asia needs it most. The LNG Canada project is a $40 billion beast that is about to start shipping gas directly to Tokyo and Seoul. If the U.S. makes it difficult to trade across the 49th parallel, Canada has a very lucrative option. Turn the valves west. Shipping from Prince Rupert to Asia is days faster than shipping from the U.S. Gulf Coast, saving millions in transport costs. By selling energy and food security to Japan and Korea, Canada diversifies its revenue stream and strengthens ties with key U.S. allies. This puts Washington in an impossible position. They can't pressure their own allies in Tokyo to stop buying Canadian gas just to satisfy a trade war. Canada is effectively becoming the Switzerland of resources, a stable, neutral vendor in a chaotic world willing to sell to anyone who pays the market rate, regardless of what Washington thinks. So what happens when you start a trade war with your biggest supplier of raw materials and energy? The pain isn't felt in the halls of Congress. It's felt on the factory floor. The blowback on the U.S. economy will be immediate and painful. American industries, particularly automotive and construction, rely on just-in-time delivery from Canada. Parts cross the border up to 7 times before a car is finished. Disrupting this flow doesn't just cost money, it stops production lines entirely. If you place a tariff on Canadian steel, aluminum, or lumber, the cost of building a home in Texas goes up. The cost of a Ford F-150 goes up. This fuels inflation, the very thing the U.S. government is desperately trying to fight. Furthermore, the U.S. cannot simply sanction Canada like it does Iran or Russia. The economies are too integrated. The U.S. grid in the Northeast relies on Canadian hydropower from Quebec to keep the lights on in New York. Trying to punish Ottawa creates a self-inflicted wound on the American industrial base and energy grid. Washington thought they had leverage because of the size of their economy, $25 trillion versus $2 trillion. They forgot that in commodity markets, leverage belongs to the one who controls the supply, not the one who prints the currency. The era of the special relationship is over. We are entering a period of transactional realism. The sentimental idea of the longest undefended border has been replaced by hard-nosed calculation. Washington wanted a vassal. They wanted a resource colony that would quietly accept whatever terms were dictated from the Oval Office. But by overplaying their hand with tariffs and aggressive rhetoric, they have accelerated the creation of a rival. They have forced Canada to grow up, geopolitically speaking. Canada's $100 billion move, anchored in critical minerals, green energy, and Asian trade deals, isn't just about economic survival. It's about sovereignty. For the first time in a century, the flow of North American wealth isn't just moving north-south, it's moving east-west. The U.S. may have started this trade war, but by diversifying its portfolio and leveraging its critical assets, Canada might be the one to finish it. The question isn't whether Canada can survive without the U.S., but whether the U.S. reindustrialization plan can survive without Canada. And there you have it. If you gained clarity today, I invite you to watch the next video. At Geo Capitalist, we focus on how power is built over time, not how it is advertised. The most important changes rarely arrive loudly, but they always leave lasting marks. If you value credible analysis of the forces shaping tomorrow's world, subscribe and join us for the next chapter. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.